Carl Gustav Jung believed you don't sabotage your life by accident. You do it because part of you believes success is a threat. They call it self-sabotage, and it can feel like the cruelest joke you play on yourself. You see the path forward, take a few bold steps, and then, almost as if hypnotized, you undo the progress you fought so hard to make. Most assume it's just a lack of discipline or failure to stay on track. But Dr. Jung believed these moments of collapse hint at something deeper. In various books of his, he explored how the unconscious can both block us and guide us toward wholeness. The paradox is this: what looks like betrayal may be a secret plan by the psyche to protect parts of you that feel threatened by growth. Jung once wrote in his book, Ion, Researches into the Phenomenology of the Self. Quoting directly, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. That is to say, when the individual remains undivided and does not become conscious of his inner opposite, the world must perforce act out the conflict and be torn into opposing halves. In other words, what you don't face within will find a way to manifest without." That's the simplest way to understand sabotage. Your hidden fears, buried desires, and old emotional scars operate beneath the surface, shaping your actions in ways you don't realize. When the unconscious senses danger, real or imagined, it pulls you away from what your conscious mind believes you want. This might seem irrational, but it often follows its own careful logic. If success or intimacy once brought pain, your unconscious may decide that a sudden breakdown or coincidental disruption is safer than letting you repeat that pain. You call it sabotage. Jung saw it as a cryptic cry for you to integrate the parts of yourself you've left behind. He introduced the concept of the shadow to explain these dynamics. In the collected works of C.G. Jung, Volume 9, he defined the shadow as, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge, and it therefore, as a rule, meets with considerable resistance. If, as a child, you learned that showing anger made you bad, you might have shoved that anger into the shadow, only to see it resurface years later, sabotaging relationships through silent resentments or bursts of aggression you can't control. If you were taught that asking for help was weak, you might bury your needs so thoroughly that you never ask for assistance, even when it's vital for your well-being, and that can sabotage your career or your health. The shadow is full of traits we label unacceptable or shameful, but paradoxically, it also holds hidden strengths and creativity. It's like a sealed treasure chest that rots if left unopened. Jung believed that the psyche is not a random pile of impulses, but a self-regulating system that seeks balance. That's where Enantiodromia comes in, a concept he discussed in his book, Psychological Types. Borrowing from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, the term basically says that any extreme position naturally summons its opposite. If you charge too aggressively after a life overhaul, the unconscious might respond by yanking you toward the opposite extreme: inertia, hesitation, or a sudden wave of self-destructive impulses. You see it as a baffling reversal. Jung saw it as the mind's way of restoring equilibrium. Every time you push your persona to an extreme, trying to be perfect, unstoppable, or immune to vulnerability, your shadow and unconscious complexities start fighting back, trying to ensure you don't abandon essential parts of your humanity. He also talked about complexes, those emotionally charged knots formed by significant childhood experiences. If you grew up with a caregiver who belittled your ambitions, you might have internalized a voice that whispers, "Aiming high is dangerous," or, "If you stand out, you'll be cut down." As an adult, your conscious mind says, "Go for it," but that old complex still warns, "You'll get hurt." When you approach success, self-sabotage can appear out of nowhere, effectively shielding you from a hidden terror of rejection or humiliation. You might miss deadlines, pick ill-timed fights with supportive people, or inexplicably forget crucial tasks. Rather than a random failing, sabotage can serve as the unconscious's attempt to keep you safe from old nightmares. In Dr. Jung's own words, these complexes can abruptly override your intentions, just like exam blocks or sudden stage fright. In his interview, he described exactly how an instinct fails at the worst times.
When I realized that there is obviously an unconscious, the question arose, now what is this unconscious? Does it consist merely of rests of remnants of conscious activities, or are there beings that are practically forever unconscious. In other words, is the unconscious factor in itself? And I soon came to the conclusion that the unconscious must be a factor in itself, because I observed time and again that, for instance, people's dreams or schizophrenic patients, delusions, that disease, contain the motives which they couldn't possibly have acquired in our surroundings. This depends upon the fact that the child is not born tabula rasa, but it is a definite mixture of or combination of genes. And the gene, although the genes seem to contain some dynamic factors of a certain behavior, then have a tremendous importance also for the arrangement of the psyche.
Simply put, Jung is saying we often don't consciously choose to undermine ourselves. Instead, our unconscious complexes, old wounds, fears, and emotional knots can take over at the worst possible time, as if they're protecting us or derailing us. An early 20th century explanation of what now is commonly called self-sabotage. This dynamic also explains why sabotage can feel so disorienting. Consciously, you're excited about positive change, ready to grow and move forward. But subconsciously, a deeper part of you may be terrified of what that change could mean. Jung emphasized that it's never enough to simply will yourself to improve. You must uncover the hidden conflicts that keep your old patterns alive. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered in 1945 in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, is a collection of sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which, like this one, align powerfully with the inner work Jung believed was essential for true transformation. While Jung was deeply fascinated by Gnostic texts, including those found in the Nag Hammadi library, he didn't often quote them directly. Yet many scholars point to a striking parallel between his teachings and a verse from the Gospel of Thomas, specifically saying 70. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. The message echoes Dr. Jung's core idea. Ignoring your hidden realities doesn't erase them, it unleashes them. Left unacknowledged, they operate beneath the surface, quietly sabotaging your best efforts. All of this might sound lofty, shadow, complexes, Enantiodromia, but Jung wanted people to see how these forces appear in daily life. Suppose you commit to healthier living. You start a new diet, an exercise routine, and a calm evening ritual. All goes well for a few weeks. Then, you mysteriously skip your workouts, stock up on junk food, and binge-watch television until you pass out. You scold yourself, "I'm so weak." Jung would say, no, something in your unconscious is resisting, and you need to find out why. Maybe that routine threatens a part of your self-image that associates comfort with food, or a part that associates exercise with traumatic gym class experiences from childhood. Or maybe pushing yourself so aggressively triggered Enantiodromia, calling forth an equally aggressive retreat. In Contributions to Analytical Psychology, Jung didn't sugarcoat it. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The core message remains. Confronting the shadow and past wounds is uncomfortable, but necessary for genuine growth. Becoming aware of your hidden motives can hurt because it forces you to see your vulnerability and past wounds. But it's also the path to genuine transformation. You realize you're not just sabotaging yourself because you're lazy or incompetent. You're replaying old survival strategies that your psyche once found necessary. By bringing them into the light, you can begin to negotiate with them. You can reassure the frightened child within that times have changed, or you can give your buried anger a proper voice so it doesn't lash out unexpectedly. Jung also pointed out that the unconscious might communicate through external events, a phenomenon he called synchronicity. It's that sense of meaningful coincidence when your inner state resonates with outer happenings in ways that defy casual explanation. Perhaps every time you vow to break a toxic habit, bizarre obstacles spring up. Your phone breaks before an important appointment, or a random friend invites you to do exactly what you're trying to quit. These coincidences can highlight the tension inside you. If your unconscious truly fears letting go of an old identity, it might collude with the outer world, or so it appears, to keep you locked in place. Jung never said the universe literally conspires against you. Rather, your psyche is so interconnected with your perception of reality that you might interpret or attract events that mirror your internal struggles. So, how do you climb out of this sabotage cycle and find a sense of alignment? Jung believed the solution was never a simple matter of discipline. He urged people to face their hidden corners through what he called individuation, a lengthy process of integrating the unconscious aspects of your personality. You begin by noticing repeated emotional triggers, puzzling dreams, or self-sabotaging moments. You ask what they reveal about your unacknowledged fears or disowned traits. You keep a journal, or you do active imagination. You imagine yourself having a conversation with the figure in your dream who keeps chasing you. You ask them, "What do you want me to see? Why are you blocking me from moving forward?" Over time, answers bubble up. In these dialogues, you might discover that your sabotage is a disguised protector, shaped by a memory of a cruel teacher or an absent parent. You might realize you never processed the grief of a relationship that ended badly, so every new relationship triggers sabotage. The more openly you engage with these pains, the less they need to ambush your attempts at growth. Instead of pushing your trauma or anger deeper, you validate it and find healthy ways to express it. That's how the shadow transforms from a wrecking ball to a source of inner power. You begin to see that your setbacks aren't proof of failure. They're echoes of protective patterns your mind once relied on to feel safe. By bringing them into the light, you can begin to negotiate with them. You can reassure the frightened child within that times have changed, or you can give your buried anger a proper voice so it doesn't lash out unexpectedly. This is what Jung might call the archetype of the saboteur. Self-sabotage not as failure, but as a hidden protector, a psychic figure working behind the scenes to shield you from perceived danger, even if it means dismantling your progress. Jung frequently cited parallels in other schools of thought. Ronald Fairbairn, a Scottish psychoanalyst and pioneer of object relations theory, described the internal saboteur, a concept that mirrors Jung's insights. You sabotage your conscious aims because an internal figure, formed by childhood experiences, fears that letting you succeed might be catastrophic. Freud, for his part, recognized how repressed desires return, disguised in symptomatic behavior. All these psychoanalytic traditions circle around the same insight. Your sabotage is not random. It's an active, if hidden attempt by part of your psyche to fulfill an unmet need or to avoid a terrifying scenario. That's why Jung also stressed compassion for yourself. It's easy to get angry at your sabotage. Why can't I just do this right? But if you see it as a misunderstood coping mechanism, you can approach it with patience. Suppose you sabotage every time someone cares about you. Perhaps, as a child, you experienced heartbreak or abandonment, so you unconsciously equate closeness with inevitable pain. That old survival program sees love as the danger, so it tries to shield you by pushing love away. When you talk to that fear, rather than shoving it aside, you can integrate it. You learn that closeness need not result in the same tragedy. You create new experiences that prove it's different now. The tension of opposites, which Jung described as a hallmark of the psyche, becomes more manageable once you realize you contain contradictory impulses. One part of you craving growth, another part fiercely protecting the status quo. He called the resolution of these tensions the transcendent function. A new perspective that emerges when you let both sides speak openly. Instead of letting your need for security unconsciously sabotage your drive for success, you mediate between them. Maybe you set more modest goals that feel safe enough not to trigger sabotage, or you find supportive people to help you face the fear of rejection. This middle path transcends the black and white struggle of forcing yourself or completely giving up. C.G. Jung's writings are sometimes accused of being too abstract, but he insisted that these principles are lived day by day. Consider a scenario. You vow to express yourself more at work because you believe your ideas are valuable. You push forward, then suddenly find yourself forgetting crucial deadlines or stumbling over your words in meetings. Instead of deciding you're incompetent, you dig deeper. Maybe you realize that a childhood pattern taught you that speaking up leads to punishment. The unconscious would rather sabotage your presentations than let you repeat that feeling of humiliation. Once you acknowledge this, you can do emotional work around the shame and fear. You can gradually prove to yourself that you're allowed to have a voice now. Synchronicity might appear if, at the exact moment you hesitate, you see an article about someone who overcame the same fear, or a colleague unexpectedly invites you to present an idea, giving you a chance to face your old anxiety. Jung would say that these coincidences can become guiding lights, reminding you that your external reality often dances in step with your internal states. When you are receptive, sabotage transforms into an impetus for growth, and bad luck can morph into an invitation to heal. Dr. Jung also wrote about Enantiodromia in the context of spiritual or moral extremes. A person who tries to live as a saint might sabotage themselves with scandalous behavior, as if to restore an inner equilibrium. Or a control-obsessed perfectionist might sabotage projects when they become too successful, unleashing chaos just to break the tyranny of order. It's not rational in the everyday sense, but it's a deeper rationality that aims to keep you from lopsided extremes. It's the reason why diets fail after radical restrictions, or why someone who tries too hard to be stoic might implode with raw emotion. He pointed out that the better path is to integrate pieces of yourself gradually, without forcing a violent swing from one pole to the other. Your sabotage can teach you where you've neglected some core need. If you sabotage your diet, maybe it means you're ignoring the psychological comfort food once gave you. That comfort might be misguided, but it signals a deeper emotional hunger. If you sabotage your new business, maybe you've overlooked your fear of being seen as arrogant. By addressing these underlying concerns, you remove sabotage's reason for existing. Yet none of this is instantaneous. Jung hammered home that individuation is slow and often painful. He compared it to the hero's journey found in myths worldwide. You leave the familiar, face trials, confront the dragon of your own darkness, and emerge transformed. Self-sabotage is one of those dragons. Each time it appears, it demands you reckon with a piece of yourself you hope to bypass. Maybe that's heartbreak you never processed, or an ambition you repressed out of guilt, or an anger that smolders because you never dared to be assertive. The dragon says, "Acknowledge me, or I'll guard the treasure you seek." That treasure is your wholeness, your integrated self. When you bring these exiled aspects into the light, you start to sense a shift. You might still feel fear, but it no longer slams the brakes on your progress. You might still hear that old voice saying, "Don't try too hard," but it becomes quieter as you show it, through new actions, that success or vulnerability won't destroy you the way it once did. Dreams might shift too. Nightmares of being chased might become encounters where you calmly talk to the pursuer, or you might see symbols of unity or renewal. Jung regarded such changes in your dream life as a sign your unconscious is collaborating with your conscious mind rather than fighting it. Along the way, you build a new sense of identity that doesn't revolve around either clinging to old defenses or leaping blindly into a new persona. You pace yourself. You make room for doubt and caution without letting them dominate. That's the transcendent function at work, forging a creative solution beyond either extreme. And ironically, once your unconscious no longer needs to sabotage you to be heard, you often find a sense of flow. Projects move forward without constant crises. Relationships deepen without catastrophic pushback. You're not immune to pain, but you're no longer unconsciously engineering it. The key takeaway is that sabotage is rarely just about being weak or lazy. It's usually a sign of conflict between the conscious goals you set and the unconscious beliefs or fears you still carry. You might discover that your sabotage lines up with uncanny coincidences, or that it intensifies whenever you push too hard in one direction. Jung's work assures you that these setbacks are not final judgments on your character. They're signals that part of you feels unheard. By treating them as valuable messages, you convert moments of defeat into calls for deeper self-exploration. If you want to break these patterns, Jung would tell you to slow down and ask, what in me doesn't want this change? Where did that fear come from, and how can I integrate it? Overcoming sabotage isn't about bulldozing through inner resistance. It's about recognizing that the part of you resisting might be stuck in an old story, replaying a childhood script, or operating on outdated assumptions about safety. You revisit those assumptions and gradually update them, letting the once exiled traits or memories rejoin your conscious life. That's how you reduce the unconscious need to slam on the brakes. Dream work, active imagination, journaling about repeating patterns, seeking therapy with someone trained in Jungian concepts. These are all methods that can help you decipher sabotage's language. The moment you shift from, I messed up again, to, why did I sabotage this, and what does it reveal about my deepest worries or unexpressed desires, is the moment you start collaborating with your unconscious instead of warring against it. That's the crux of Jung's philosophy. Your unconscious is not your enemy, but an integral part of your psyche that demands respect and dialogue. People sometimes ask, does that mean sabotage is good? Jung never called sabotage a good thing, but he recognized it can be a necessary wake-up call. Without it, you might just keep running away from your unhealed emotional wounds, never realizing your pursuit of success or love or transformation triggers a primal fear left over from another time. Sabotage is how that fear surfaces, forcing you to see it. That's why many discover that once they heal the underlying trauma or accept the hidden trait, the sabotage eases, no longer needed as a protective mechanism. You stop shooting yourself in the foot because you finally learned you can walk safely or run freely without stepping onto the same old psychic minefields. You may also observe that synchronicities begin to feel more supportive than obstructive. Instead of repeated bad luck, ironically hitting you each time you try to move forward, you might find small openings or unexpected helps. Jung would say that when your unconscious conflicts diminish, your outer world can reflect a new sense of harmony. It's not magic so much as the dissolving of an internal tension that used to interpret or attract events in line with your old sabotage script. Freed from that tension, you notice opportunities instead of pitfalls, or you meet people who share your new mindset rather than feed into your old insecurities. Over time, you see that the best remedy for sabotage is authenticity and patience. You can't forcibly outrun your shadow. You can't shame your wounded inner child into submission. You must do what Jung insisted. Bring forth what is within you so that it does not destroy you. That means steadily peeling back layers, looking at where you learned not to trust, or not to strive, or not to rest, and letting yourself rewrite those rules in the present. It means letting your anger, or grief, or longing find a healthy channel instead of simmering underground, blowing up your life at critical junctures. When you do, you experience a unity inside that feels profoundly different from false confidence. Your conscious and unconscious wills align enough that sabotage is no longer your default reaction to stress or expansion. The mind's self-regulating nature works in your favor now. It helps you course-correct in balanced ways instead of yanking you to extremes. You may still make mistakes, but they're less likely to be catastrophic. You get up faster, glean wisdom from them, and move forward without the old dread. Imagine how life changes when sabotage stops haunting your every effort. That's what Jung meant by individuation. Not a sudden perfection, but a day-by-day integration of all you are, past pains, present aspirations, and future potentials, so that each part of you has a seat at the table, a voice that's heard. No single fear or compulsion lurks in the darkness, waiting to sabotage you. Instead, you move with a wholeness that welcomes complexity instead of denying it. At that point, your big leaps forward aren't cancelled out by the unconscious, because you're carrying the unconscious with you, openly and compassionately. Of course, it's a lifelong process. Jung repeatedly emphasized that we never fully exhaust the mysteries of our psyche, but we can become vastly more aware, more capable of insight, and less prone to sabotage born of fear. That, he would say, is the real measure of growth. Not that you never falter, but that you recognize the deeper reasons when you do, and find a way to integrate them. It's how the unconscious becomes an ally, guiding you toward aspects of yourself you might otherwise leave behind. So the next time you catch yourself tearing down something precious, be it a new habit, a hopeful relationship, or a leap toward your dream, try to pause. Ask, which corner of my soul feels unseen or endangered right now? That's the conversation Jung invites you to have. You might not get immediate clarity, but by asking, you open a door. You allow the deeper truth to surface. And once it does, sabotage can start dissolving, replaced by a willingness to adapt your plans or rewrite your stories so that the hidden child, the buried anger, the unspoken dream, and the adult you are finally on speaking terms. That's how sabotage morphs into synchronicity and how suffering becomes insight. It's not about perfection. It's about welcoming every part of you, light and dark, into the circle of awareness. When that happens, your unconscious no longer needs to drag you back into old patterns, because you're no longer running from yourself. You're making room for all you are. And that's precisely the moment Jung believed your real, most honest transformation begins. And never forget, together, we will remember our timeless wisdom.